back again with Miss Helen from Encore and Premier Strings. And today she's going to talk to our Encore Strings auditionee friends about how you can prepare for your Encore Strings audition. Hi, Miss Helen. How are you?
Good. Thank you for having me here, Miss Sam. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. So we're talking about our Encore Strings violin excerpt today, but all Encore Strings auditionees can benefit from these tips and tricks, right?
That's right.
Okay, great. Well, let's go ahead and bring up the excerpt. And here it is. This is our Encore Strings violin excerpt. It's by Mr. Vivaldi. It's his concerto in C major. So, Miss Helen, do you want to talk about a few things that you listen for in the Encore Strings audition room?
Yes. The first thing I would have everybody do is make sure you listen to it. YouTube the Vivaldi concerto in C major, so that you have an idea as to what you're aiming for. There are 5 things we look for: rhythm, dynamics, intonation, technique, musicality, and tone kind of go together.
Great. Well, okay, so I noticed the first thing you said was rhythm, and I think this is across the board through all auditions. Rhythm is absolutely the very first thing that we listen for in orchestral auditions. So, what parts of this excerpt are tricky for rhythm?
Well, let's take the first 2 measures, because if we can subdivide the first 2 measures, you pretty much have the first 14 measures because the pattern's the same.
Wow, that's efficiency right there.
The first measure is 3 quarter note beats in 16th notes, and then the second measure, these 3 quarter notes. What I would have everybody do is, instead of playing the 16th notes in the first measure, play them as quarter notes. So play the whole thing through, the first 14 measures as quarter notes, and then when you've done that, then subdivide into 16th notes and play all of the measures, the first 14 measures, as 16th notes. So even in measure 2, where you have that C quarter note, the G quarter note, E, play those as 16th notes. So you have that subdivision. 1, 2, 3. Okay? And I wrote it out for you so you can see it a little bit clearer. So this would happen for the first 2 measures I would work on first, and then you can, once you have that, you can do it for the first 14 measures. To play the first 2 measures only using quarter notes.
Okay.
Then the first 2 measures only using 16th notes.
Okay.
And then play it as it's written in the music.
Okay.
The second place where I would look at for rhythm is if you look at section A, A to B. You see you have the 8th notes, and then on the first beat, you have that little 16th note passing note put in there.
Yeah.
I would take out that the second 16th note for each one of those measures and play it just as 8th notes. So 1 and 2 and 3 and so on. And really listen out for the notes that change. So the pedal note throughout that is that C. The C is always returning.
This C right here,
The notes that you really want to look for is the 3rd beat and the 1st beat. So from A it would be 1, 2, then you have the E, F, then it goes back to the C, and then it's the F to the G. So you have that skeleton of what you're listening for. And then once you can play from 15 through 22, add the little passing note. 1, 2, 3.
We're really establishing what it sounds like in our ear so that the little passing note, that B, doesn't get in the way.
That's absolutely correct, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Great.
And then just a little technique to add there. In measure 21, the measure before B, we highlighted it in red earlier. I would do 2 up bows there so that you start that next phrase that begins the piece with a down bow.
That's a good suggestion, yeah.
Yes. So that kind of covers the rhythm aspect of things.
Right, so there's steps like you outlined for each of those spots to break down and practice them several different ways and make sure that you can do each of those ways perfectly before you go on to play as written.
That's right.
Great. So what's the second thing that you're listening for in the audition room?
dynamics are really, really important. In this piece of music, in the Baroque period, they would have subto forte, and you have subto piano and subto forte written in here. But in Baroque time, they would play something and then they would imitate it. When they imitate it, it was kind of like an echo effect. So if you take the first four measures, you see that the first two measures are exactly the same as the second two measures.
Right here.
So you still want to have like that feeling that it's loud, it's forte, but the second time you play it really should be an echo effect. So I would play first two measures forte, second two measures mezzo forte, and then make sure you bring it back up at measure 5, and you can see it's the exact same concept.
Right.
5 and 6 loud, and then 7 and 8 is repeating 5 and 6. So I would do forte and then mezzo forte there.
Just like we've kind of added these edits. Now these are not in the original music, but you're saying if you listen to a recording and you study Baroque style, which you get extra points if you do, you'll hear a lot of great orchestras do it this way, and this is how this music is meant to be performed.
That's right. Yep.
Awesome. Can you demonstrate maybe how the first 4 measures should sound?
Okay.
Yeah, that's great. The first 2 bars were definitely louder than the second 2 bars, but just by a little bit, because remember, we have this piano coming up after A, so we don't want to go all the way down to piano yet.
And then we're looking at intonation. Make sure that you are in the key of C major. In this piece, we're so used to playing as violinists in D major and playing those F sharps and C sharps with our second fingers high. Remember to keep those second fingers close. I would start this piece personally in second position, and you could in fact play the first 14 measures all in second position. I think we put a number 1 there for fingering at the very beginning, and then in measure 14 going down to first position with that B.
And this is just a suggestion for fingerings, but you should always talk to your private teacher to see what fingerings they recommend as well.
Yeah. The first 2 measures, do we know what that is? The first 2 measures, we're in the key of C. If we have C, E, G, C, what is that? Do, mi, so, do, so, mi, do.
I think that's an arpeggio.
It is an arpeggio, that's exactly right. So you have to be able to play a C major arpeggio as your part of your audition. So if you can play that, you can certainly play this piece very easily. And look for things that you know. So for example, in measure 5 and 6, G, B, D, G, D, B, G, that's a G major arpeggio. And then that leads us to measure 9 and 10. It starts off sounding like a C major arpeggio, which is what it is. But then you have this 7th. It's made flat. It's a B flat. So it turns it into a dominant 7th. So the C major would be, arpeggio would be. But now you have that B flat. And so lean in on that B flat. And a little extra vibrato, a little extra loving, and then you can really hear those harmonies, and you'll actually enjoy playing that B flat rather than just thinking, oh, there's an accidental.
Right, because Mr. Vivaldi is trying to surprise you with his music there, so you should bring that out.
And another thing, the bowing, make sure when you're playing with the bowing, I know a lot of people like to, on a modern bow, at the point. But then you're limited to the sound that you can make. I actually kind of like it in the middle to lower half so that you can make more phrasing. Otherwise, if you get stuck at the point, you don't get to use as much bow, and you can't change the sound as much as you might like. Another thing about the technique, if I were you, the second measure is 3 quarter notes. And every alternate measure for the first 14 measures of 3 quarter notes, I would do that down, up, bowing for every single alternate measure. So measures 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, I would do that down, up, bowing.
Yeah, to make sure you come out correctly. Good. Well, those are a lot of good tips. Are there any kind of practice exercises to make sure we're using like the right part of the bow?
Okay. So you can, I would practice your C major arpeggio, since this is, there's lots of arpeggios here. And I would practice playing below the middle of the bow,
Uh-huh.
and just play normal quarter notes. I like playing my concave bow, and if you listen to the Premier Strings
Yeah.
interview, I like to do these saucer shaped bowings. You can do on the open A, and it goes all the way from you can play from the Baroque period, the classical period, and so you can subdivide right on an open A string. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a, okay? The one thing that I would do too is practice playing your C major scale and your C major arpeggio with a metronome. I always start at quarter note equals 72. That's my magic number, but because I just find that slow enough but fast enough. But you can pick whatever works for you. And play your arpeggio or your scale at that tempo. Then play 8 notes. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and then I would do the 16th notes. 1. And then you can take the tempo up. You can even do the rhythm that you have at letter A on each note. So. And you can do it with the arpeggio, and you can practice your bowing there. But make sure that you stay away from the point. Because then it has that wispy sound, which is not really what we're looking for since we're playing on a modern violin.
Great. And I think this is something I used to do when I played horn, is sometimes I would practice in looking at myself in the mirror, because then I can make sure that I'm doing all the things that I'm supposed to be doing, because sometimes we get really carried away and we might end up all the way at the tip and we don't know it. But if we're looking at ourselves in the mirror, we can make sure that we are staying in the right part of the bow the whole time.
That's a great idea. And you can even make the shape of those saucer shapes that I like to call it, from the concave bowings. You can air bow it, and then you can just touch the string and do that in the mirror, still making sure that you use parallel bowing.
Great, great. Well, any other things, Miss Helen, that you're listening for in this excerpt?
The last thing I would say is that in your head, you have to have a concept of what you want it to sound like. So if you can sing it, give it a direction. Where are you going with it? Is it just C, E, G, C, or is it C, E, G, C, G, E, C? And make a shape out of it. That you can shape it for every 2 measures, and then make the longest shape for the four measures for a phrase. But give it some life. Make sure you're singing it inside, so that when you're playing it, we can hear those characters and those phrasing coming out.
And a good rule of thumb is, if you look at the shape of the line, as it goes higher, maybe it gets a little bit louder, and as it gets lower, it gets a little bit softer, just to make it have a little bit more music. Remember, we're always playing music, right? We're not just playing notes. We're always playing music and things that feel a certain way.
And that's exactly right, Miss Tham. In the Baroque period, especially, because they were playing on Baroque instruments, the tessitura, when the notes got higher and the pitch got higher, it tended to get louder. And then when the notes got lower, the tessitura got lower, it naturally got softer. And so it kind of plays it for you, the piece does, in that respect.
That's really great. So we're looking for that kind of style too. If you listen to your recordings, like we talked about at the beginning, you'll hear all our professional musicians take those things into account as well. Yeah, well, that was great. If we practice all these things, then we're going to have a really good time in the audition room.
I can't wait to hear everybody's performance.
Me neither. Thank you, Miss Helen.
Bye.